Hello, my name's Laura Walton. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also a scuba diving instructor, and I work with people relating to diving issues. I'm here with Gemma and Ian on the Big Scuba podcast to talk about how diving can impact psychology, both kind of individually, like our mental health and things like that, but also a little bit how we can understand people a bit more through diving activities, and also how psychology can help us as divers.
Hello and welcome to the Big Scuba podcast. My name is Ian and with me is...
Hello, my name is Gemma. Welcome to the Big Scuba podcast.
Yes, these episodes are sponsored and brought to you by NART.90. They are beyond technical. So, welcome back everybody. We've had a little hiatus. We've been sunning it up and enjoying the sunshine through August. We had a small little break.
We did. Our last episode was out on the 20th of July. That was Sally Cartwright. And since then we've done another episode. We reviewed our trip to the farms.
We did 185. That's what I was going to say.
And this is 186. But we've had a super summer and made the most of the great weather we've had.
Oh, it's been awesome. I hope you've, if you listen to this in the depth of winters, this is lovely and sunny. This is the beauty of a download, so you can listen to it any time. But hey, this is September and it's sunny, and we hope you've all had a great summer great summer holiday. So, but it's all back to school and back to work and back to routine.
We're back as well.
We are back. We're back like a renegade master.
Okay. Yes, I have heard of it.
Great.
So, but we're back to regular recording and issuing our podcasts out every 2 weeks.
So we've got a guest. We have got Laura Walton.
Dr. Laura Walton.
Who's on to talk to us all about the physiology of the science in diving, so mental health, all that sort of stuff. Psychology. Is that the word?
Yes.
You knew what I meant.
And she's the founder of Fit to Dive. So she looks at people that have been diving, have got some issues or trauma, and aims to resolve it.
Now you need to listen, because it all helps if you move your finger, apparently, and you'll hear why.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite cool.
What, you're waggling your finger?
You waggle your finger, yeah. But anyway, so have a listen to that. Kind of follows on from what Sally Cartwright was talking about. And Dr. Laura Walton was recommended us from Sally. So we'll say thanks to Sally for recommending Laura. And we kind of follow on from that kind of theme. But if you are wondering about what this podcast is all about, we talk to divers, we talk to people who love being under the water, photographers, explorers.
Yeah, anybody connected to the water that is really passionate, and obviously passionate about conservation and planet conservation ultimately.
Yeah, and we both like to dive. We don't get to dive as much as what we'd like to because...
Do you have full-time jobs and families?
Full-time jobs, young family, and so you can't always get in the water as much. You hope to, but we do try. We
do, and we also get on the water as well. So we're fans of kayaking and paddleboarding, snorkeling as well.
Yeah. So as we said on the way into this podcast, we said we did a dive at the Farne Islands, which was really good. That's a bit of an annual pilgrimage.
It is up north.
Organised by Crystal Seas in Norwich, and go up there. I've been going for several years now, ever since I learnt to dive. Yeah. And you're now on your, fourth time?
Fourth time, yeah. So it consists of 3 nights away and 3 days of diving, 2 dives each day.
And this is my daughter's, Honey's first trip to the Farne Islands. She's 14, and she loved it. In fact, if you go back to that episode, we did some shallow dives. One of them on a wreck, Conroy, SS Conroy, and which was awesome. Never dived that one before, and our last dive was about 5 or 6 meters, and it was absolutely full of life. Water was so clear.
Pretty.
In fact, somebody said to me, they saw my truck, and on the back of my truck at the moment, I've got a roof box type thing on the back, mainly for Gemma's makeup and clothing and everything else that Gemma likes to bring.
It's been very beneficial.
We don't have any room for our stuff, but it's all Gemma's anyway. And she was asking me about why we got it and blah blah blah, and I said about diving. And she said, well, I learned to dive and dived in the UK, and it was really dark and I couldn't see nothing. She said, and I didn't dive anymore. And I said, well,
Crazy.
do you know what? Dived at the Farne Islands last week, and it was so clear. It was as clear as what it was, on a summer's day, and it was really clear. 5-6 meters. There was lobsters, crabs, anemones, jellyfish, seal. There was the whole floor was full of critters.
Just colourful.
And for a 14-year-old, seeing that was just amazing, and and get that fire going. So UK diving, it's there.
Definitely. Might not be everybody's cup of tea, particularly in winter, but summertime we dive in semi-dry.
Even winter time, there's some great dives.
If you're equipped and clothed adequately. So we have been very lucky.
We have been. We did a trip on our kayaks to Blakeney mid-August.
That's another bit of a pilgrimage we try and do every year. But it's obviously very dependent on weather and tides.
Yeah, we have to kind of... So if you look on our Norfolk coast, right on the east side of England, there's a tiny little spit, and that's right at the top at Blakeney. We go out of Morstan Key. It's about 14 kilometres.
That's what we totaled. Yeah.
And there's a wreck up there, which was carrying coal. And when the tide go out, you can sort of walk around bits and pieces of it. Sometimes there's more standing up, and some of it's not. It's on the mouth of the estuary of Blakeney there. And there's a marker there, and we normally go out of Morstan, go out to there, and then hang around for a few hours while the tide disappears.
Yeah, we have beautiful sandy bank.
No, it's beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely lovely up there. But it is a matter of like getting all the planets aligned. You have to get the tides right, you have to get the daylight, the wind, the weather right, because once you're out there,
there's no protection.
If it starts chucking it down with rain coming at you sideways, you don't want to be up there. So.
But it was a lovely sunny day. It was a bit chilly when we got out there. We had to have our spray jackets on, but beautiful sunshine, and we put the drone up, and we also saw plenty of seals.
Yeah, loads of seals.
Fishermen fishing for bass. You were very friendly.
Yeah, so they're good. So that was a really good trip to do. And then we did paddleboard and Cromer at Weybridge. So Cromer on a Wednesday night on the North Norfolk coast. Cromer's famous for its pier.
Crabs.
And crab, Cromer crabs.
Cromer crabs.
Yeah, very good. And on a Wednesday night it's really cool because you get the lifeboat often out there practicing.
Surf
and
school.
You've got the surf school, then you've got the tourists, and it's quite a busy beach, even at like 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, people having barbecues and just chilling out on the beach. So we had a nice paddle, and we did see a seal, didn't we?
We did, yeah. The seal popped its head up.
And it was an amazing evening. It was like being in the Mediterranean, wasn't it? It was 25 degrees at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, and the sea was like 18, 19 degrees. Blue, turquoise, could easily have been abroad.
Yeah, and we finished the evening off with a nice fish and chip supper.
Of course.
That's what you do. So that kept us out and about.
Yeah, and then last weekend we went down south.
We had another adventure. We had a night away. We stayed at Swanage. Our intention was to snorkel and dive Swanage Pier.
That was the plan. Yeah.
Unfortunately, the easterly winds blew in, so it was rough, wasn't
it? We
went
last year, and it was like it was just lovely summer's day when the sea was like a mirror. There's hardly a wave, wasn't it?
It was just perfect conditions for diving.
We had a really nice dive, and that was Honey's second time in the sea because we'd done Lundy the day before, and then went to Swanage on the next day,
and she loved it, didn't she?
And loved it. Loved going out to Lundy. She was the only one who kept dry on the boat, wasn't she?
That was a rocky, bumpy
rocky
road.
one, that one. Yeah. And hello to
Ben and Sam.
And at Lundy Diving, and that was a great. Well, this time around, this year, we went. It was a quick trip down to Swanage, and the easterly winds had chopped everything up.
They had. The water, there was no visibility when you looked off the quay. So luckily, when it's bad at Swanage, Chesil Beach down at Portland is the perfect place to dive because it's protected from the easterly winds.
So we've got some hellos.
Yes, we certainly have.
So we need to say hello firstly to
Maria. Maria Munn. She's based in Swanage. She does photography courses and snorkelling under the pier.
If you look up ocean vision photography.
Yeah, that's it. So if you're interested in brushing up on your photography skills or just having a guided snorkel, contact Maria. We were going to obviously have a snorkel with Maria, but it's just the weather gods weren't on our side for Swanage, but we might do it again.
Well, hopefully. I think next year that would be really good. And then we spoke to Tom, didn't we, at O3?
We did.
Mr. Wright. Hello, Tom.
Tom is based at O3, so we just asked him for a bit of advice where to locate ourselves for diving.
Because he'd be a local down there, those parts.
Yep. So he gave us amazing tips on where to park and where to enter the water, and they were just spot on.
Yeah.
So that big thank you.
Oh, we went to see Portland Bill.
We did, yeah, the lighthouse. We took Honey there.
We saw a dive boat coming in.
Skin Deep.
That's right. Yeah, we saw Skin Deep.
Yep.
Saw the divers coming in off Skin Deep.
And we could also see the weather coming in. It was
thunderstorm,
stormy.
Yeah.
So we then travelled to Chesil, parked, and then had
awesome.
Quite a rainstorm come in, so we had to wait a bit before we got in the water. But
we had a quick photo opportunity outside O3's
we did,
office, didn't we? Again, no, they weren't there, but we thought I'd just get a quick photo as we dive in O3 suits and O3 semi-dries.
Yeah, and then we saw Dive South at Chesil.
Hello
Lisa
to Richard and Lisa.
Yeah, so it was really nice, and Lisa even gave us some tips about getting in the water, didn't she? About, sort of heading out. But it was just a lovely shore dive.
Richard was singing the praises of side mount diving, which I kind of fancy actually.
Yeah, you're showing. Yeah.
I think that might be one of the things look at doing actually is learning to, because we had a go at the Go Dive show, didn't we?
Did, yeah.
Actually with Richard and Lisa, didn't we?
Yeah, and it was great.
So it was really spooky that we go to Chesil Beach and
see them.
Bang, who do we run into as Richard and Lisa?
Yeah, so, but yeah, that's something for the future, maybe over winter.
So. Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that.
Yeah,
actually.
But the actual dive was one of our best we've had, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. So, okay. And I think one of the things we also would be really good is to just tell people how easy that was. Really, it was a nice, easy place to go to dive.
There is a lot of talk of it being quite a steep incline to get in and out, but really it's a bit overrated. I think
I don't think it's too bad.
It was to take it steady.
I think it's to take it steady.
To be honest, if you can't manage that, you really shouldn't be diving. If you get out of breath climbing that.
Wow,
I think
you just, it's a matter of just pacing yourself.
Yeah.
But I think I thought it was okay, and
I did.
And maybe on different tides and maybe different weather conditions maybe it is pretty tough.
Yeah.
But certainly last weekend, 10 metres of viz.
We literally got in
10 metres,
and it does shelve quite steeply. And I was looking, and it's just like a swimming pool.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this is awesome.
It was just.
Honey was away. It's just like, wow, this is great.
Yeah. So basically, we just headed out, and then I think we got to 11 metres and just poodled about. We saw fish, jellyfish.
Oh, loads.
Yeah, it was. We picked up some fishing gear.
My daughter has got a liking for waving at fish.
Yes, it's all on film.
I'm not sure where that's come from, but when she see a fish, and we saw quite a few like wrasse and what have you, it's like hello.
Yeah, and Honey, it was really amazing to see Honey under the water because she's just like so inquisitive, picking up shells.
For her, that was dive 18, I believe she's on now.
Yeah.
She qualified, did her open water with Crystal Seas last June. And then we've been chipping away ever since, and hopefully I think she's going to be wanting to get in the water now, between now and Christmas, at least once a month. So it'd be really good.
And we were all in. Well, you and I were in semi-dries, O3 semi-dries, which we love, and Honey was in a wetsuit and a shorty. So, and we all were warm.
Yeah,
we didn't feel cold at all.
No.
So we always sing the praises of O3 semi-dries. They are just amazing suits.
They look smart as well,
They
actually,
do.
to be fair to them.
Yeah, flexible, just makes diving just
So
nice.
there's a long john. You wear that.
Short john.
Short john? Long john?
When the legs
What is it?
Short john.
Short john.
Yeah, it's like
It looks like a long john.
I don't know what you call it.
Well, it's like a basic. It's like a 2 mil, 1 mil.
Yeah, so basically
Neoprene.
it's a one piece shorts and a vest top. So that keeps your core warm.
Go on O3's website anyway and have a look.
That's a short john, and then the actual semi-dry 5.
It's really weird because like I feel really warm with it, and I feel fine up to about 10 degrees and up to about sort of 10 meters, depending on the thermocline. And then all of a sudden you'll be doing your thing underwater, and you get like this trickle of cold water go down your back, and it's like, I'm getting wet, and then I was like, hold a minute, I am wet.
Yeah, you can have a wee in them and everything.
Do you? Well, you heard it here first, listeners.
Yeah, so
Gemma likes to mark the spot. So if you ever dive with Gemma, just always keep upstream, because you never know.
But they are really lovely to dive in.
Yes, they are, to be fair. And we've had them now, a few years
Couple
now.
of years, yeah.
And I have used mine at the farms and been the only one on the dive boat in a wetsuit. And I've been absolutely fine.
But they are our go-to for the summer diving.
Definitely. I love it. Yeah.
And they're easy to get into.
And next weekend I'm at Stony with Crystal Seas helping out as a dive master, and I think I shall be in my semi-dry next weekend.
Why not? Yeah.
At least on the Saturday anyway. So so unless I'll see how it goes. See how it goes, how the weather is, but I think I should be at least one day in semi-dry.
Yeah, so look them up, O3 semi-dries.
They are really good. 65.
65, yeah. And they do look pretty smart, I think.
What else have we been doing? You've got a special dive coming up.
Well, Chesil Beach was my 99th dive.
So, ideas on a postcard, please, to... Gemma
Keep them decent.
Gemma should be doing her 100th dive naked, because that's traditional, at Lowestoft Towers, Pakefield.
Yeah, so, and I'd prefer to do a sea dive rather than inland.
So where do you think, let's have you, it'd be good to hear from you. Where did you do your 100th dive?
What was your retire?
Yeah, and any ideas of how and where Gemma should do her 100th.
Exactly. Yeah, we're sort of hoping it might be a North Norfolk diving window. We've still got plenty of people diving off the Norfolk coast, haven't we?
Yeah, it's been some really good stuff. Photos being shared.
So the Rosalie is a wreck that we've done, but there is a wreck called the Vera at Clay that we'd like to try. So that is sort of on the cards. And then we've done. We've snorkeled the Sheringham Snorkel Trail, which is another amazing
And you can
place.
also dive off at West Runton as well.
You've done that, haven't you?
Yeah, on the chalk reefs, which is quite well known off our coast.
Yeah, it's good to see everybody getting some good local diving.
Yeah. We mentioned Richard and Lisa from Dive South, so look them up. We mentioned Maria Munn, Ocean Vision Photography, look her up. We mentioned Tom, O3, look him up, and O3 and 90 are our lovely sponsors. Look them up.
Definitely, yeah.
Everything. Oh, we use their scissors. So on the dive at Chisel, we found some fishing gear.
Yeah, and I'd put the little...
that somebody lost. Well, 2 lots, actually.
Well, it was they were sort of a filament
line.
One had
a hook, didn't we?
Yeah, the heavyweights.
Yes.
Yeah. So the scissors, I'd attach them to my BCD, and they came in very handy, didn't they?
Yeah. So look them up if you haven't got you see divers at Stony with great big daggers.
We saw some at Chesil.
Do you really need a great big 3-4 inch knife at Stony?
Slay dragons underwater, they look like. But Yeah, and sometimes you see them they're on their leg and then they've got one on their BCD.
I'm not sure.
Warriors
I'm not
underwater.
sure we quite need great big daggers like that.
But that little pair of scissors, great gift for any diver in your life. They're only, I think, sort of 12.
When I had cut some line down at Brighton on a wreck a few years ago, I found with a knife that's quite tricky, whereas scissors is much easier.
Yeah, it just makes it more controllable, doesn't it? And you're not going to not going to drop. Easier to drop a knife than those pair of scissors. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, so they were great. So look those up.
And quite cheap as well, actually, to be fair.
Yeah, great gift idea.
So that's kind of our sort of download of what we've been up to, I think, really.
But we are back and...
So if you are of the diving world and you've got a story to tell, get in contact. Let's hear from you. Raise your hand and let it be known, and we'll get you on, have a chat with you to find out why. We've had all sorts of people on, from astronauts, poets,
passionate divers,
photographers, you name it. So just go back. There's 4 years and 180 odd episodes of us chatting, and we're going to contact some of them people as well that we have spoke to, because some of them now, it's a few years ago.
Yeah, they've become very...
So what we kind of now need to do is, like, maybe we'll revisit some of them if they want to come on. And poor old Andy Torbett, we spoke to him really early on, and we hit him with four pages of A4 questions.
We don't work like that anymore.
No, you live and learn.
It's a very informal chat. That's our framework, and our guest on this episode said
he was very patient, but I don't think he had nothing else better to do, did he?
No, we were all twiddling our thumbs in COVID times, weren't we?
Yeah,
but yeah. So any recommendations or people you'd like us to contact to interview?
Yeah, we'll have a chat.
Well, not interview, chat to.
Yeah, have a chat. Yeah. Always good to get the story.
Yeah. So, but yeah, our guests.
Particularly like the crazy ones, the funny ones. So they're always good.
Mad ones. What are you saying?
Well, Mike Valentine. I always remember when we spoke to Mike Valentine, and we'd spoke to somebody before that. And that person, we were like, what's going on? Well, when we spoke to Mike Valentine, it was a laugh from the time he came on to the time we finished.
It was hilarious.
We had a hell of a time, didn't we? It was great.
Yeah, I don't think we stopped smiling.
And I always think back to chatting to Mike and having a ball of a time.
Yeah, it was what he came out with. Even his actions, he had something on the shelf, didn't he? Threw over his shoulder.
When he got his teddy bear that somebody gave it to him, in mid-conversation, he just chucked it over his shoulder.
Yeah, it's quite a character. But there you go. There's 185 episodes for you to go back and listen to.
So let's talk about our guest today. So our guest today, as we said right at the start, she talks and she's got Fit to Dive.
It's an organisation that she set up. Yeah, so Dr. Laura Walton, so about the psychology, looking at our brains, basically, and how to fix issues, particularly divers have had with diving. So they might have a mental block with, something might have gone wrong. So they
have a freak out in the water. And it can happen to anyone, and some of the people she's helped, some of these divers have had thousands of dives. They're salty sea dogs that would be instructing. They've done years of diving, done amazing dives, and then for some reason, one day something just throws them. So she helps them get back in the water and overcome that, so that doesn't become a stumbling point of a point that they can no longer get past.
And she's working mostly by referral, isn't it? So people have, and it is mostly recreational divers. It can happen
to anyone.
Yeah, I did ask a question about whether she does commercial divers, but it is on the whole recreational divers that she works with. So it's good to know there's an avenue for some assistance if you need it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get her on.
Yes. So this is Dr. Laura Walton.
Brilliant.
Laura, welcome to the Big Scuba podcast. It's great to have you on. So at the moment, where are you actually based? You're in the UK?
Yeah, I'm in Northumberland. I'm kind of pretty near the coast. So yeah, as I was saying, diving out of Farns and St Abbs up here as well.
Wow.
Yeah,
Mm.
Our
yeah,
favourite part of the UK.
it
Hmm.
is. Yeah, we were up there in end of July, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, doing the Farne Islands. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was enjoying you talking about our local boats there as well, because we dive with Sob and with Andy and Ron as well. So it was really nice to
Excellent.
just hear, a
Yeah.
lot of
What we
activity
do
going on
quite
around
like.
those islands now.
Yeah, they're
Mm.
great guys and they
Mhm.
always look after us so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we sort of kick the podcast off and always ask our guests, how did your introduction into the underwater world begin?
Into diving, and yeah, it's gone back quite a long way. So I was in my late 20s when I was traveling around the world, and I went to Australia. And there was a trip out to the Barrier Reef. So obviously you go to the Barrier Reef because you go visit it. And even though I was actually kind of terrified of things in the water, the try dive was only $1. So I kind of had to do that. And I was so terrified I couldn't sleep. But the moment I got my head under the water, I was just completely hooked. And we did that little dive with a little group. And then they brought us back up, and it was an option to do another one. I was kind of begging them to let me get back in, and I was really lucky that the dive guide, he he hadn't got anybody else, and he agreed to take me on my own. So on my second try dive was on my own. So then after that, I moved. I was already traveling Fiji, Rarotonga, and Tahiti. So I went and did my open water course in Fiji, and then dived in Rarotonga, and then ended up in on Moorea in Tahiti on the way back. So that's how I started diving, and then I came back home, and of course, kind of had that question of do I come and dive at home as well, and then had to adjust to the temperature and the diving here. So yeah, quite a long way back.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Learn and dive out there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it was very, very colourful. Yeah,
Yeah. So
it got spoiled, I think.
what agency did you do, Paddy?
I actually learned originally it was SSI,
Mm-hmm.
was the yeah, Scuba Schools International, and then I transferred over to Paddy. And I've dived with a few different agencies. I've got qualifications with TDI as well. Do various different qualifications and training. But then so jumping forward quite a bit. When I came to the UK dive, and I got involved in a club here, so Deep Blue Scuba up in Edinburgh.
Okay.
So when we when I kind of got involved in that, I got really involved. I was diving every weekend, and then I did my dive master training, and then I've kind of worked my way up now to I'm a master scuba diver now. Master scuba diver, master instructor. Sorry. I think
Yes.
I'm more tired than I thought I was today.
So you obviously lived and breathed diving then.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have done for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, you mentioned about the psychology side. So where
Mhm.
did that all kind of merge with your diving? Did you
Mhm.
study that at university or?
So like right from the beginning. So I was saying how like really quite frightened I was doing the try dive. So at the point I was doing that try dive, I had already done a degree and a degree in psychology and a master's, and I was traveling after that. And when I was actually doing the try dive, I immediately started using psychology to help me, because it was one of those, when there's a lot of people on the boat and they're trying to kind of get everybody moved through quite quickly. It was quite like a busy try dive. And so it was a case of getting on the ladder at the back of the boat, kind of lowering yourself down, putting your face in, and away. Like there was very little kind of time, and this is out in the middle of the ocean as well. So it was quite intimidating. But the moment that I put my head under the water, and there was kind of an instinct there, my head just jerked straight back up, because of course your brain is not used to breathing underwater. So there was just a kind of reflex action. And so I kind of knew I didn't have much time, and I kind of just thought through how, why is my brain lifting my head out of the water, well, it's because it thinks I need to breathe. And actually, I need to just really convince it the way I breathe is through this thing in my mouth now. And I just really tuned in to that thought really strongly and focused on the regulator. And like for me, that is me drawing it from. A lot of people do manage to do something like that themselves, but that was me kind of, you know, using what I knew from psychology to help me. And it's basically helped me from the beginning, which is why I'm so interested in sharing it, because it went from like helping me. Like there's so many examples I could give of, you know, times that it's helped me overcome something. But then when I became a dive master and an instructor, I've used it obviously to help other people and to, you know, help them with things that they're going through, or just explain why something works the way that it does. So yeah, basically all the way through. I kind of would have paused to let you answer questions, but I could keep talking about that for ages.
Well, one curious question I've got is like, you know, before you started doing like Fit to Dive and moving into what you do now, when you was a dive master, were you then, I know you just said that you were using some of those psychological skills to help people. Is that when you suddenly thought, hey, actually, I could do this as a more of a role and a business, and you know, because there's more and more people that need this?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually quite slow. It's a good question. It's kind of what I was kind of, you know, thinking about next is that, yes, as a dive master, but I think it was almost that, I think when I was working as a dive master with people, and we're training, you know, back then I was training up in Loch Long, on the west coast of Scotland, as you probably know, very very dark, often very silty. Sometimes you can only see about a meter, and I've got water students with me, so it's quite a challenging place for people to learn to dive, particularly in February when it's hailstoning. We need to take up water students out at that time. So yeah, it's there's a lot of challenges. You would see, like you would very frequently see people having issues. People, you know, I've seen quite a few issues with panic, or also just confidence, you know, when you just start out, and it is hard, and people start beating themselves up thinking they're not doing well enough, but actually it's just because it's hard. Or getting kind of stuck with certain skills, or you know, when they're kind of getting shut down because there's just too much information to take in. So yeah, we training up there, I kind of seen a lot of issues, and it was quite like, well, the stuff I know about this, like at the same time I was doing that, I was working in the NHS in mental health wards, and I was also learning all the time about, you know, psychosis and how the brain works. And it was just things like, you know, how the brain works underwater, and you know, when we get deeper, and how, you know, how our thinking changes, and parallels between narcosis and psychosis. So I'd seen that, and then yeah, I just kind of always wanted to think about how psychology affects divers. So if anybody got a lift with me, they could end up having 2 hours of me talking about the psychological aspects of what we'd just done for the day. So obviously that can get a bit much. So I started just writing. So I wrote originally, I set up a website, just a blog, and wrote basically just wrote all the different things I was thinking about, and how different psychological concepts connected to what people were going through, whether it's like mass clearing skills or something like that. And then set that up and was just writing blogs on it. It was Scuba Psyche, the website. And then that just kind of got a bit, what I was wanting to do got bigger. So originally, when I started doing this, I didn't think that I would work as a clinical psychologist, because I just didn't think that there were enough divers that would have, you know, like major issues. And also it was before like Zoom, before we were able to work online, before therapy was done online. So it just hadn't originally occurred to me to do that. So I moved into like making courses and just sharing all the different things that help. But then more recently, I realized that actually, when I talk to people more and more and more, I'm meeting people who have had actually quite significant traumas underwater, or they've kind of not been able to go back to diving because of something that happened. And often it's something that I know can be overcome. There's different therapies and things that you can do about it. So yeah, the last few years I've really focused first on anxiety, then on trauma. And so clinically I work with more people, and I just hear more and more of it out there as well.
Yeah. So your clients or the people that you see, are they recreational divers, or is there a mix of like commercial divers as well?
Yeah, it's mainly recreational divers. I do work with sort of recreational technical divers as well, because sometimes you can use psychology for therapy, but you can also use a lot of the same things for kind of coaching and performance issues. So if there's like some specific skill somebody's stuck with, you can use it for that. And that's sometimes of interest to people who just want to build their performance. So I do that, but mainly recreational. I have talked to quite a few commercial divers, and I've talked to medical doctors about the needs in commercial diving. So there's certainly a need there, but there's a lot of complex issues around. So I've talked to a few. I haven't actually worked with that many yet. I've kind of had a few different conversations with medical doctors relating to different cases, but not yet. It's something I'm thinking about actually. So what made you ask that? Is there...
well, just because obviously the commercial diving world, there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and we've seen go wrong. And do they obviously put them back onto the surface, or do they get back in the water and carry on, doing what they're doing?
Yeah, so it's I think there's a massive need for it, as you say. As far as I've understood from the people that I talk to, and of course you don't know all the perspectives, but like the people that I talk to, it's just the way that there's a lot of complexity there in that system that people aren't necessarily going to speak up when they've got an issue, particularly if it's something that's a bit kind of under the radar that they can kind of continue working on, but it's maybe just mounting up in the back of their mind. It's just kind of, they kind of... A loose example might be maybe something's gone a bit wrong on a shift, like it's been a near miss. Everybody was fine, nobody was physically injured, but it's not being processed, so that when they go back, it's kind of still niggling. And then that can come out in different ways. So that can come out, it can come out in behavior, it can come out in how people communicate with each other. It can also lead into self-medication, it can lead into it. I mean, addiction's tricky in the commercial industry because they have to pass drug tests to go out, but it can lead into, alcohol use and things as you try to kind of numb the... If it's a level of PTSD, that can be quite common because you get symptoms that are really quite unbearable. So people find ways to deal with them. But then there's just the more low level stuff. If that happens, that impacts performance. So if you have something go wrong and then you learn from it, you can move forward, and it can be a really helpful thing. If the team's able to kind of take forward the lessons from what happened, maybe make some changes and improve things. But if something goes wrong and it's not being processed by the brain as having, passed and moved forward, it can be stuck, and it's like that emotion's kind of still stuck in the system, and it can cause stress, it can get in the way of thinking, which can therefore lead to errors. And it'll be the same in both worlds, but I do think I would agree with you. There's definitely a need for commercial diving as well. And there's not, as far as I know, any there's no kind of system of diving psychology. I mean, they get diving medical checks, but not psychological ones like you would in the aviation world. So you have aviation psychologists. There are no technically diving psychologists. That's like there's no organization that can assess me and say you're a diving psychologist. It's just building up, and people getting interested at the minute.
Yeah. So what's an example of somebody that you would see and work through the process as in a recreational setting?
Yeah, so recreational ones, there's one kind of fairly common pattern, which is somebody who's just been diving, not had any issues, been fine with diving for ages, and then has one experience where it's gone really wrong. That might be something that ended up like in a chamber, or it actually might just be they were at depth and they really panicked. They maybe got their water in their regulator or something like that, but they basically lost the ability to have the capacity to cope with what was happening and got completely overwhelmed. And usually maybe somebody's come and helped, or they've got out of it, or they've bolted to the surface, unfortunately, but maybe they've been okay, or maybe they've been to the chamber. Basically, there's been an issue. And then ideally, I love to work with people straight after that, because it's much easier to work with that than it is later on. But most of the time, by the time people contact me, it's usually a bit later. And what's happened is they kind of got out, they were fine, they calmed down. They thought, well, that was not good, but I'll be fine. And then they go back and dive again, and the same fear, because it's unprocessed, gets triggered again. So it's basically a trauma reaction. So they panic, and then they get really frustrated, and they try again and again. And all of this time, they're often getting shallower and shallower, or they're creating more more controlled conditions because they're trying to avoid the feeling. So they might start buying new equipment, doing lots of different things, trying to kind of get away from the anxiety. And it kind of just builds up. And the longer that goes on, the harder it can be to work with. I still can, but it's yeah. So I do kind of have a service where it's like straight after incidents to try and kind of mitigate some of that to prevent any kind of PTSD in the first place. Although I should say this isn't everybody. Like plenty of people have a bad experience and are completely fine. It's kind of, my guesstimate is that, like from looking at studies, it's something like a quarter to a third of people maybe develop some issues, but most of the time you can have something happen, as you probably know, and you're fine. So that's probably, yeah, for therapy wise, it's one of the main groups. But there's also like other kind of issues around that. There's sometimes maybe there's other kind of forms of mental health issues going on, or sometimes people start having an issue when they're diving, but actually it's because there is something at work or at home that is causing stress levels to change, which is then it's kind of going underwater as well, which people find really stressful because they want to go diving to relax, and then if they can't relax when they're diving, and they're also not having a great time in life, that can get stuck. Another thing I've worked with a few times is people who've been involved in rescues. So just being a rescuer can sometimes be really quite anxiety provoking and kind of leave a lot to process. Not always. Sometimes you kind of come out of it feeling like you really helped and you can move on. But if you were rescuing somebody who was close to you, or they were maybe injured, then that's obviously going to have more of an impact as well. But that's kind of the main groups of people I think at the minute. Keeping it fairly broad without identifying anybody.
Are we all typical? Because like, do you see like the same, do we kind of generally all behave in the same way after an incident? And you can say, well, you could spot that. So the person could be in denial, but actually you could spot the signs and go, well, actually, this behavior is happening because you've seen it before, and you see that's generally the way a person would react after an incident. Are we all typical, or do we all just behave randomly?
I think that's kind of an intriguing question because, like, in one way, yes, but in one way, no. Like, everybody's so individual in how they react. But I mean, it also depends who you are. And when you say you could look at someone and say, yes, they're struggling. Well, who are you and what is your experience? And I could look at somebody and read things in a different way than you would or the next person would, just because we've all got different experiences in life, and we would look at them in a different way and infer different things. Like I know with the team that I work with as instructors, we find it really useful sometimes when we and students having an issue, we have a chat and think, I think it's like this one, and they've got a totally different opinion, and it's useful to change that sometimes. But I think thinking about like your question, it makes me think of what I was, listening to Sally's podcast, Sally Cartwright chat with you last time, that when something happens, that reaction is quite interesting. So she was sort of saying, sometimes you have something go wrong, and I've had this before. Like we were diving out in St. Abbs where we got kind of completely washed off the Glanmire, and then my SMB failed, and somebody else had put the SMB, and we're kind of racing along the bottom, and it was very dark and really quite scary, and we ended up like half a mile out from where we were meant to be, and everybody back on that boat was sat there kind of just smiling and staring at the sun because we were like, that was not great, and we're all quite pleased to be back on the boat. And I wouldn't necessarily describe that as traumatic, because often it is the case that you just come back and you do move on, and you pick up, oh, maybe I'll do this differently next time. Or maybe you decide you're not going to dive with the person that you just dived with. You maybe make a decision and change it. But sometimes something gets stuck, and sometimes you can't just have a bit of a break and a cup of tea and move on. And the reason that happens is to do with the way that our brains process information. So is it, or if I just explain that? I feel like
Go.
So how we go around the world where we're absorbing information all the time, we're taking in data, you know, we're seeing color, we're seeing feelings, textures, sounds. There's all sorts of information coming in through our senses all the time. And it's our brain's job to filter, process, and store that information and kind of file it away for future use so that we know that it's over, but also we know how we can move forward with it.
Right.
So that happens when things are fine. But when something happens that exceeds that, you know, the thing that is happening to us exceeds our capacity to cope, then our brain starts to process information very differently. First of all, it kind of shifts more into survival mode, and there's a whole set of reactions I could talk about in a different way with that when we think about panic. But it shifts into a different mode. It's currently focused on dealing with the situation. So all this data that's coming in, it doesn't sort and filter it in the same way. It's like it just takes it in and dumps it in a file separately and says, we'll sort that out later. While it's, you know, you're currently working on surviving. So when the stuff is over, that file sometimes can sort itself through. Like I've seen this myself when I've been in stressful events. Sometimes later on, you'll see images flashing through your mind as to what happened as your brain just sorts it out. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it gets stuck, and you can end up with somebody having maybe some flashbacks, or maybe they can't sleep, or maybe they're just going over and over in their mind, thinking they should have done it differently, or you know, any kind of symptoms of PTSD might come up. And if it doesn't get, the other thing people might do is just suppress it, try not to think about it at all. So it's stuck in this separate file, and for to have the reaction that you want, which is the kind of moving forward, this stuff needs to be kind of opened up again and sorted through and processed and filtered and integrated within the system so that we move back into learning, back into growth again. So that, like listening to you talk last time, that's kind of the answer to what Sally was saying. Is like, I mean, it's not the whole answer, it's very complex, but sometimes you can just come up and you're fine and you have a cup of tea, and sometimes you can't, which is absolutely baffling for people who have hundreds or thousands of dives, have been fine all their life, and then suddenly one thing just breaks them. Because this is what's happening. It's kind of just got stuck, and there could be many reasons why something gets stuck.
This episode is brought to you by Narked at 90, the cutting-edge pioneers in the world of diving equipment.
Meet the founders, John Routley and Brent Hudson, who have logged thousands of mixed gas dives over the past 3 decades. About 20 years ago, these experienced technical divers combined their passion for diving and engineering skills to create Narked at 90.
Whether you're new to diving and ready to take it up a notch, have a fair amount of experience, or are considering a transition into technical diving, we highly recommend Narked at 90. They're ready to advise on the best equipment and setup for your personal or commercial needs.
Narked at 90 also has extensive hands-on experience with shearwater and ratio dive computers, being the longest-serving UK service centre for these brands. They're ready to offer technical support, servicing, repairs and upgrades for all shearwater and ratio computers, past and present.
In addition to shearwater and ratio, Narked at 90 stocks and supports many other brands such as Divesoft, JJ, CCR, Hollis, Revo and Kiss Rebreathers.
The diving community is always enthusiastic about Narked at 90, and it's easy to see why, and here are a few of the reasons.
Full head servicing for rebreathers from various manufacturers.
Bespoke cable assemblies.
Advice on specific fitting requirements.
Suggestions and guidance for home builds.
Computer laser, cutting and engraving.
CNC milling and turning.
Pressure testing to simulate 400-metre dives.
So we're thrilled to partner with Narked at 90, a company that has ignited so much passion for diving and has been incredibly supportive and innovative in producing and selling dive equipment.
Visit Narked at 90 to see why they're a renowned name in diving. Stay updated on their insights and offers by following them on social media. Just search for Narked at 90 on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram and hit that follow button.
Yeah. So do you find the people that you see are quite experienced divers? So they've done lots of diving and then they've hit this block that's preventing them to continue?
Yeah, there's a variety. I think at the minute I get quite a lot of that because you probably, I know, like I can obviously tell that you're also really keen divers, and when you kind of come into diving and it becomes part of your life and part of your identity, you're obviously really attached to it. And when something comes that stops it, like you've had that bad experience, it's got stuck, and then a lot of times people are embarrassed about it, so they don't talk about it, so they keep trying to push through it. They're not getting any support, so it's getting worse. Then that can go on for quite a while, and a lot of people are quite reluctant to get help early on, and it's only, you know, sometimes years later that people are contacting me. So I do get people sometimes where they're just at that kind of, I don't know what else to do and I really want to fix this, is often when I get it. And as I said, you can do something, but sometimes it's easier if you do it at the beginning. Yeah, so there's that, but also a bit earlier on, I think where I don't get people is if somebody's just tried diving, like they've done a try dive and it went badly wrong, or they maybe just started their own water course and they couldn't move forward through it. Those mostly they tend to just not dive. They tend to give up diving, I think, which is, I mean, it's a shame because some of the stuff that gets stuck is quite fixable, but at the same time, you wouldn't necessarily be motivated to embark on like a series of therapy appointments to fix something. So some people might want to work through that, but some people wouldn't. So yeah, a lot of the time that group will just kind of stop diving. The common problem I'm thinking of is that it's drowning in the world. In the UK, it's relatively common to have a drowning experience and survive that, even quite a mild one. So like kids falling in a swimming pool, being scooped out, falling in a pond, or just having bad experiences with water when you're little is actually relatively common. And because a lot of the time people are just picked up and wrapped in a towel and they're fine, it wasn't a major issue, but actually for a split second they were under the water completely powerless. That gets stuck, and then they're fine all their life, they're quite happy, and then they're learning to dive and the instructor asks them to take their masks off and suddenly they're having a really strong reaction. So that kind of stuff's quite common, but I don't get contacted for that much because people just tend to go, it's fine, I'll move forward, unless they've managed to kind of get through all their dive training and then they maybe want to go further into technical diving or something like that, and they're like, right, I actually really need to fix that now, because I can't be going into, you know, technical diving without being able to be very confident in a mask.
Could there be a way that maybe like some of the open waters are done? Because the first dive is always the hardest, because I've noticed with students, I'm sure you have as well, is that the second dive people find it easier because they've been in a pool, or especially in the UK, they learnt in the pool, and then they go and do their first dive in an inland quarry or somewhere like that, and that's like, oh, it's not very clear now. It's, you know, they were fine in the pool. Now in this big lake, they're like, oh my God, you know. Is there anything that you could do, or you could advise people like Paddy, BZAC, and some of the other agencies just to maybe change it slightly, or is there anything like that? Because and I think especially with try dives, I've heard quite a few people say they tried it on holiday, they gave it a go, and for whatever reason something went wrong, hurt their ears, you know, something went
I've heard
wrong,
that a lot,
and that's it. They never got back in the water. 10 years later, still never tried it. And they see diving as this thing that is something that they'll never do again, and it's such a shame, because you know, as a sport, we need everyone to give it a go, because we need the numbers.
Yeah, and it really is a shame when it's people that you think actually they would really enjoy diving. Like, I mean, I think there are occasionally people who think actually maybe wouldn't enjoy it that much. Maybe it's fine that they, but there's a lot of people that you think they'd really enjoy it and they're not able to do it. I think that is a real shame. Your question about like changes what to do, I mean, there's like a lot I can say about that. There's a huge kind of like amount of different things that I do. A lot of what I do is within the PADI system. Like it has to be, you know, from a insurance and things perspective. A lot of the things I do, and I adapt my kind of teaching style towards are still within the PADI system. It didn't necessarily have to change in terms of the book. But I mean, there's.
But look at another way, right? When somebody fills it, when somebody go to a dive center and they fill the form in, the questionnaires, don't they? and they tick all the boxes to say whether they've got any medical issue or anything like that. And as soon as someone says yes, straight away it goes to the doctors to sign them off, doesn't it?
Mm.
And they do a fitness test to say, you know, they can do as 100 meters swim, and then they can go and dive. In today's modern world, we don't, and where, you know, we're it's very open now about mental health and things like that. There's nothing. There's nothing actually in the PADI documents or learning to say as part of the course, you know, is there any, you know, to any sort of feedback or after the first dive, nurturing to make sure everyone's okay. We do check they're okay. There's nothing actually, you know, to check whether somebody's had an incident before.
I mean, this is a massive question. One of the first parts that come to mind is it's really about having a systemic approach and understanding like the entire system. So I don't know, you're probably familiar with Gareth Locke's work and the Human Diver. So looking at kind of human factors first, and like as you said, the thing about people not saying something, you've got that power dynamic there. Then a lot of the time, our students won't say something unless we have the system in place for that to be the norm. So what we've done at our dive centre, so I work with Honest Diver up in Northumberland, and we kind of implemented from the Human Diver that that debrief system, mostly within our team, but also like to kind of show our students, show the people that we're diving with, that we're happy to notice the things that we didn't do right, and then we kind of make that really clear, and then it gives them a sense of, you know, I can say I did this wrong too, or I was scared as well.
Yeah. You see, I represent probably the population of diving who are probably some of the worst culprits, because most men will just say, yeah, fine, we're right, we're okay. I think women are probably more open. And
that was going to be one of my other questions.
Yeah,
with their feelings and things, where generally most men will just say, and of a certain age, let's face it, I do think, you know, you see it, you do, and I've
yes and no.
I know I'm painting them with all the same brush. I get it, but hey, I'm of the in that group, and you know, not always the easiest to talk about.
Yeah, but the culture is more powerful than your individual responses. So if you're in a culture where people don't speak up, where everybody's always fine, then you're much more likely to do that, whether you're male or female. I think that, I mean, you're right, there is a little bit of a difference, but I've certainly been in groups where women won't say anything either. They're determined to make sure that people don't know that they've got an issue. And then you might see them sneaking around a corner and chatting to somebody else and saying, are you okay? I don't know if I like this. But they won't necessarily do that in the group unless it's set up in a safe way, unless it's psychologically safe. Because you're making me think of like you know, various examples, but like there was one time I was diving out in the Canaries, and you know, in the Canaries, you rib boats, very bouncy, big waves, and I'm used to it being bouncy, but this was really like the waves were quite big, and I was paired with somebody who was shaking. So I hadn't met them before. My body was physically shaking from nerves, and I was like, okay. I was on holiday, so I was like, okay, I'm kind of not so much on holiday today, but that's okay. And we got in the boat, and the ride on the boat was pretty rough. And then at one point we went over a wave, and the dive master fell in the boat and twisted his ankle, but we were still going out. And I was sitting there thinking, because I'm a PADI master instructor, and the guys who were running it, they were interns, so the dive masters, and I'm not quite sure what level. And I thought, actually, hang on, I'm kind of the most senior person here, but I was terrified to say something. I was like sitting there thinking, I mean, not terrified, but I felt really uncomfortable. I eventually said, look, at what point are we going to say this is not a good time for diving? And they just put it straight back on me and said, well, you don't have to dive, we'll take you back if you want to go back. And I sat there, and it was really uncomfortable, but I said, no, take me back. This is enough. Because in my head, I could see an incident pit forming. It was just one thing after the other. And we changed the dive site. And you know, when you change the original plan, things are more likely to go wrong. I just said no. And I did feel like really kind of awkward coming up, you know, all my kit, walking up the stairs. But when I got off, a couple followed me. they got off behind me. They had said nothing. And talking to them later, it turned out they were brand new divers. They'd never boat dived before. They'd been told it was going to be nice and easy. And so once they actually got off, they'd never said anything. There was a woman and a man, and neither of them had said anything. But she was furious once she actually kind of got off and decided. But they would have never said anything. It's really about that culture and the fact that if people are able to speak up. And I just know how hard that was for me as somebody who's been diving for like more than 10 years at that point, and as an experienced instructor, I found that hard. So it's obviously hard for a lot of people unless you have it built into the whole system. Yeah, that's one example. I can think of other ones.
I've got a question for you.
Mm.
Going back to I find it quite interesting what you said about the brain getting stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was thinking, with our computers get stuck at times. And I often think people's brains sometimes there's some similarities between a computer brain and our brains. And when our computers get stuck, what's the thing that we do with our computers? We turn it on, off, turn it back on again, and miraculously the gremlins are gone, and it all works fine again. You know. And Gemma and I often have this discussion: why is it a digital thing can sometimes be working fine, and then you turn it on again, all the settings are all over the place. It's all weird and wonderful, and it's all gone wrong. So, what's the equivalent for us as humans of turning off and on?
A reset button.
Yeah, what would be the equivalent of a reset button in the diving world? Because would it be saying, right, we'll do something completely different? So maybe the opposite, we do a parachute jump, because that's kind of the opposite of doing a dive. Or do we do something else and we go for a horse ride, and then we talk about some of the stuff that's what's caused the issues about being nervousness?
Yeah, I mean, again, I could answer this in loads of different ways. I mean, one very simple answer is sleep. But if you've got PTSD, sometimes it's very hard to sleep. But sleep, during the sleep process, like during sleep, our brains process information. It's literally kind of moved around and sorted and stored, and that's what dreams are about. It's our brains processing information. So sleep can really help in reprocessing what's happened if our brains get stuck. But sometimes if you got like stuck in the sense of a behavioral issue, I kind of explain that in one of the other therapies that I do, which is acceptance commitment therapy, which is the idea that sometimes psychologically we just get stuck. And what you're saying is really interesting, because in that therapy, what we kind of think is that effective, healthy, functional human behavior is flexible. So behavior being both our thinking, the things we do in our head, ruminating, thinking, daydreaming, whatever, but also walking, talking, any kind of behavior. That behavior is flexible if we're healthy. So we adapt to what's going on around us. If we detect a shift in the conversation, we're able to move and change. A healthy human being is one who can have this flexible behavior. I don't mean that it's like sort of wishy-washy, would just give up. It's more like it's effective and it's workable and it moves towards the situation. So when people get stuck, what they do is they get stuck in inflexible behavior. They end up repeating the same things over and over again. With like the diving examples where somebody's kind of hit a wall with a particular skill or sight or an issue, they'll often try the problem that's keeping them stuck is they're trying to fix the anxiety, they're trying to fix the stuckness, and it's like they're just digging themselves deeper and deeper into a hole by trying to get rid of the discomfort.
To the same spot.
Yeah. They just kind of go in the same thing, because actually the more anxious and more you struggle with anxiety, the stronger it gets, because it's a fight or flight response. It is there to protect you. So your fight or flight system is ramping up. And if you struggle with it and you say, I don't want this, I need to get rid of it, you actually end up building it further and further, increasing the stuckness, getting the hole dug deeper. But if you can do something else, so this doesn't mean about flexible behavior. Sometimes when I'm working with people in this model, it's like, just do something else, anything else. And sometimes moving into a different mode can kind of switch that mindset and start getting somebody unstuck. There are other ways to kind of get the unstuckness. I'll talk about that in a second, but it's interesting you say just doing something else, because actually that can get you moving again.
I've got another question for you. Okay. So say you're diving, you're on a dive where you normally dive. You're confident, everything's going well.
Yeah.
Okay. And for some unknown, unexplained reason, you suddenly thought, oh, you know, I'm starting to feel a bit nervous. You know,
just free floating. It just comes
heart's
out of
going,
nowhere.
things like that. And you're thinking, why?
Mm.
Why is it? You know, is there anything you can do as a quick fix in your brain as a self? You know, some people say, you know, they'll have a word with themselves.
Yeah.
And say, oh, what am I doing? You know, this is
Mhm.
crazy. Or
Mhm.
is there a quick fix that you can suddenly go, which is a trigger, and that'll go, hey, it's all okay? Because it's kind of thing that we spoke to with Sally.
Yeah, I heard that bit of Sally talking about it as well. I think it's a
quite
really interesting sort of topic. Yeah. I suppose like it's not really like an instant thing. The difference is what you're trying to fix. So if you kind of get that coming along, if you see that as an issue and try and get rid of the discomfort or anxiety, you can start digging that hole, and that can spiral, especially in diving when you've got the gas density effects and the potential for, you know, high CO2 or narcosis to spin things even faster. You can start digging a hole out of nothing with that. So the key thing is, rather than trying to fix the feeling, it's like, okay, I'm noticing I have this feeling. And you'll see really advanced, you know, technical divers, cavers talk about this. Like the fear just comes along sometimes.
Yeah.
And the key thing is you're not reacting to the fear, you're just knowing that it's there and saying, okay, that's there. Not especially useful to me right now. Let's move along. Like, and to focus instead on the situation. So sometimes that little niggle might be actually quite useful. It might be telling you something you've forgotten. It might remind you just to check your air or something. So if you can move it from, okay, there's a little signal, there's a little flare going on. That's okay. I noticed that. What can I do? What action can I take right now that will be useful? So that might be just pausing. It might be getting your body's attention. It might be checking your air. It might be, you know, any number of things that might be a useful thing to do. If you take that back a bit further, having a set habit or procedure will help you a lot more. Like if you've got a way of, you know, do your checks or whatever, that can be really comforting to just run through that normal check. But it's that have a word with yourself concept I quite like, because I've had that myself like quite a few times where you just notice like you're all wobbly and like, I don't even know what that is. So you just like, okay, stop. I usually get a body's attention just so they'll stop as well, so we don't end up with a body separation issue as well. And just stop and try not to do anything. It's like, you know, it's like if you you know, you're swimming along and you get a silt out, the last thing you want to do is start finning even harder and stirring up even more silt. You want to kind of just calm it down and stay still while you can let that reaction settle. And it really strongly reminds me of a dive that I did. That idea, it just reminds me of a dive that I did a while back up in the Sound and Mull, and I was kind of leading a little bit. I had less experienced divers with me, but it was on the Thesis, which used to be a very lovely wreck up there, but it's kind of been a bit flattened now. And it was like down to like 14, 15 meters, came down the shot line, and I was like, just had, you know, like you said, that feeling of just something's wrong, even though I know nothing's wrong. And just made myself pause and slow the breathing down, you know, kind of just notice what is that I think is wrong, like run through those checks and look around, see everybody's fine. And then I actually had a great dive that day once that had settled. And it's also knowing what that is. Like sometimes it is a physiological thing. So I think that example that I was just sharing there, that was you're on the boat, you're getting ready, you're putting your dry suit on, you're getting a bit hot, and then you've got to jump in the water. You've maybe had some issues getting in, you know, somebody's took your weight belt or whatever, and you're going to get yourself sorted. And you've got in, and all of a sudden you're like straight down the shot line, and you've just changed the gas that you're breathing has just changed density to the point that you've ended up with a lot of CO2 in your system. So you're just feeling a bit kind of anxious just because of the carbon dioxide. So even just knowing things like that can sometimes help. Sometimes people have these big anxiety things, and it's just because they didn't know what narcosis was, and they've hit that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, because the quick way always makes me nervous, because it's like if you're just quickly trying to get rid of a feeling, that doesn't work. But if you can sit with the discomfort, like that's the have a word with yourself thing. It's like, actually, hang on, what is the problem? I can't physically find an actual problem. Sometimes there's still a gut feeling around, and even if you can't find what the issue, if there's a strong gut feeling like I'm not good today, then you can call the dive, can't you?
Yeah.
So like it's I think for me it's the turning towards the feeling rather than trying to run away from it. I mean, there's other stuff that connects with it as well. Like if you, as an instructor, like if you like if you're teaching and you've got people to be responsible for, sometimes that'll pull you into it as well, because you don't have the option to lose control. I mean, it's kind of there, but you have a more strong pull to, like, I need to step up and make sure everybody's okay. But it's not, I get uncomfortable talking about that kind of split.
Yeah.
Because it makes it sound like there's a choice when somebody loses control and panics. And I don't think there really is a choice, but there is in those moments that you're talking about, that kind of weird little wobble or kind of something coming out, and
they're
those
different
moments
levels, aren't they? They're not
time.
they're not different directions, they're kind of different levels or kind of magnitude, aren't they, of either talking to yourself or, like you say, stepping up. It seems you've just got to make that decision.
Yeah. So like I said before, that the different levels kind of thing is interesting, because the very definition of trauma is when something happens to you that is kind of bigger than your capacity to cope. So you have these little wobbles and there's like a feeling of I can't cope, but there's like this little, if you get enough of a window, there is this moment when you can choose, where you can sort of go, actually, I can cope. That when you first start diving isn't really strong, because you don't have all the toolkit, you don't have all the skills, so you don't know that you can cope. So that experience just builds up over time after seeing yourself cope. Like, you develop confidence by seeing yourself do things well. You don't actually have the confidence until you've been able to do them. So you can kind of get that, but at the same time, it is perfectly possible for even somebody with a massive toolkit of different skills and lots of confidence and lots of skill. It is possible for the right buttons to be triggered to push them straight into panic before they even get the chance to do something about it. So I think I don't like to make the idea that you can choose panic, because nobody chooses to lose control, and nobody chooses that. That only happens if the brain perceives that somebody's at such threat that it switches off the front part of the brain, the bit that thinks. It cuts the connections to that front part, and you're now running on the kind of central part of the brain, the limbic system, which has grabbed hold of your control of the arms and legs and lungs, and it's making you breathe fast, it's making you bolt to the surface, it's making you do that funny swimmy thing. Because it thinks that's your best chance of survival, because it doesn't understand diving physics, but you're not connected to the thinking bit. Once you're in that, you can't override that. That needs somebody else to come along and rescue you. But there's sometimes like you said, that little window where you can just slow it down and just kind of talk to yourself, and it's giving yourself that sense of control back. Actually, I can see this feeling. I know that I'm uncomfortable. What am I going to do about it? And putting it on yourself rather than kind of throwing it out to the situation or other people. But it is quite a fascinating experience. It sounds like you've had a few of them as well.
It's fascinating. Yeah. So
I was, sorry, go on, Jen.
No, go on.
I was just going to say that I was listening to a D-Day veteran being interviewed, and he was asked if he was scared. And he said, well, yeah, everyone was scared. Of course we were scared. He said, but the difference was I could think, and I could think about the training, and the training then got me through being scared. You just accept that what you're actually doing is something is unnatural, is scary, and you remember your training, remember everything the tools that you've got to find, and it will be okay. So kind of talking to himself. So it was quite interesting.
But I mean, that relate to that highlights like another part of the answer I didn't get into, which is that habitual kind of overlearned response, that you've got the habits and they're there, and you can trust that you know what to do. Like I remember when I first learned to dive, you have to really think about things, but then you suddenly notice yourself just doing stuff automatically, like clearing your mask before you even needed to think about it. And that kind of automatic kind of behavior.
I think there's a phrase for that. It's about being on a autopilot. Conscious. Can't think.
Thinking fast and thinking slow is the kind of connecting to
It's
you,
that whole thing of driving somewhere where you commute and you get to the point and you can't remember the journey.
Yeah.
You've been on auto.
Yeah.
There's I can't remember can't remember the
So
terminology for that.
I mean, that's a big theory. It comes from Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who described this whole kind of sort of theory of the way that the brain works. It has kind of two systems of thinking. One is thinking fast, one is thinking slow. Thinking slow is like when you're learning to drive or to dive, you have to do everything really consciously. It takes a lot of effort and brain power. And then once you've done it enough, it becomes smooth and completely can be done unconsciously without using any conscious thought. And actually, if you start to consciously think about it, you probably do it wrong because it's just kind of cemented in there. And then that takes very little capacity. So that's one of the things with training is that idea of you're building things up slowly because those students don't have enough capacity to learn everything at once. They've got to kind of get it in there, get them to repeat it over and over and again until it's kind of squished down in the brain's capacity, like in a computer. If you've got a computer running several programs at once, it's going to crash. But if you can get those programs down to be very small because they've been repeated so much in the brain, then they can run several more. Just like when you start adding in a camera after a few dives. Once you don't hit the camera on your very first dive because you can't focus on the camera and be able to keep yourself in the right place. But yeah, so there's that can backfire as well, though, because you can sometimes do the wrong procedure. But as you say, that gives you confidence. If you've got training and you've seen yourself do the things that you need to do, even if you haven't done them. So again, when you ask me about how we need to, how we improve training or the things that I do that sort of augment the training that I do, is there's a lot of different answers, and one of them is that you very gradually adding skills. You're not overwhelming that system so that somebody's really stressed. You want to kind of get the stress at a nice level, that they're a bit stressed and excited, but they're not overwhelmed, because otherwise that capacity is all going to turn into self-protection and survival. It's not going to turn into learning. And once you've repeated the skill a few times and they've got it right, you want to bring in the scenarios, because if you've got the scenarios and they see themselves in the swimming pool doing the things that they need to do in response to actual triggers to do them, then they're going to kind of start to kind of build the confidence. But yeah, I mean, that is within all training systems already, that idea of
Right.
bringing those skills in and adding the scenarios. It's just sometimes it does get left off, or it gets there's not enough time, or there's it's done in a different way. But I could come back to that question, add even more things.
And it depends on the instructor as well, as that's a big thing, isn't it, with the students, and how the instructor is putting these skills into allowing that time and process, and everybody learns at different rates as well. So
and that's what I mean about the whole system. It's not just the instructor, it's the whole setup, like how much time you have. Like as a UK instructor, like we often are really squeezed for pool time. So depending on if you've got your own pool in the centre, great. But if you're having to hire at a leisure centre and things, it can be really tricky. And you're bringing in all that stress of like, have we packed all the things, get all the stuff, get it in, we've got to get out before the swim team arrives or whatever. And the instructor's actually stressed enough about the logistics, and that can transfer over to students, even though it's got nothing to do with the actual dive. How do you kind of create an environment where people can, first of all, feel psychologically safe? They feel like they're seen and that people are actually going to look after them, but also that they're free to play around and learn stuff, and have enough time to explore and to integrate and to figure things out for themselves. That's another thing I do with teaching. I actually step back a lot and give people a lot of space to figure stuff out. Like I give them the little bits of information they need. So like we get the kit on or whatever, and I say, well, that's your inflate, that's your deflate. Have a play around with that on the surface. Once you've got enough like to do that, they can go away and start playing around with that, and they get buoyancy and they get hovering within first 10-15 minutes sometimes of a session, without me actually having to teach anything. So it's given that kind of freedom, and it's that is one of the things that I do that is really about maintaining people's sense of their own autonomy, because it's really easy to strip that away. I've done that myself in teaching. It's really easy to pull away somebody as a student, their sense of autonomy, because they're in this completely new world. So even if they could be like the manager of a bank, or like they could be like doing all sorts of different complex tasks. They could be, you know, ex-military, they could have like a lot of skills, but you bring them into like a pool and a diving environment. It's your environment, and you kind of brought them down to a really low power level. So it's how do you kind of help create that system so that they can bring themselves into it and use all the skills that they've already got, and kind of weave them in, rather than feel like they're being stripped down to not knowing anything again. But yeah, again, I could talk about that for a long time.
It's a huge subject.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do people, you obviously run this as a business, so do you get people referred to you by dive centres, or do people just find or know about you and then come and have some kind of sessions with you to try and overcome their
Yeah, I mean, mostly at the minute it is still people who've managed to sort of track me down somewhere on Google. And because I think I'm the only clinical psychologist, certainly in the UK, who kind of actively specialises in this area. There are psychologists who are divers, but I kind of actually really study and actively kind of work with it. So that mostly that, sometimes maybe through my courses, there's a few people that I know who might, you know, if somebody contacts them, they would then pass them my details on to them, and also the diver medics as well. So I communicate with them. I've been to a few of their conferences, which are actually really interesting, and learn quite a lot about dive medicine, and it's really nice talking to all the diver referees. You know, the UK DMC, the dive referee, kind of the medical doctors who can do dive medical references. So a few of them know about me, and a few have, like DDRC, have referred a few people over to me. But it's all self-referral, so it's mainly a case of passing the details on. So I have like all the details for that on my website, and I do there's like a 15-minute call option if people want to just find out what I do and what's available. I do that. I think that pretty much answers the question.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And do you sort of get into the water quite a lot? Are you quite an active diver as well?
Normally, yes. Although this year, not so much, for a number of different reasons. But yeah, not normally. Normally I'd be trying to be like every weekend. But you know, for the last few years, I've been teaching most weekends. But yeah, this year we're having a bit of a break in the dive centre. They're focusing on the kind of retail side, the Honest Diver. So we're not teaching as much and not getting out to dive as much, which is a bit frustrating. Because I was listening to your experience with the Farne Islands, and I haven't actually been out there recently. I have been out to you know, to Eyemouth and the Gullies, and to Beadnell, and we go out. Whitley Bay was, I think Whitley Bay was nice. We did St Mary's, you know, the lighthouse, you know, you're talking about. No,
in the farms, or
no, in St Mary's and Whitley Bay. There's a little island. There's like a tiny little causeway across. It's a little bit further down from the farms, and it's only 5 meters. Like it's 5-7 meters. It's really shallow. But we hadn't been for a while, and we went for a dive there. Just a few of us, and the whole dive we got seals. They were just following us around for like an hour. It was really nice. So that was nice. I have sealed some seals this year recently.
St Mary's, was it St Mary's?
Yeah, it's a little shore dive.
Yeah, we'll have to look that one up, because if we're is it dry? It's what, an hour or so from Farnes or Sea Houses?
Sea Houses are maybe 40 minutes that way. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than that, but a bit further south. Yeah.
We've when we've been to the Farnes, we've done a couple of trips up to Loch Long to extend the trip and just dive around the piers, and that was amazing. But like you say, it does get very dark. So
I love Loch Long. I've done like 400 dives in Loch Long.
Wow.
Because we would just do that as a training weekend every weekend. So but I just love it, because I love when you get, I haven't been for ages, but because of the runoff and the peat from the hills, you get that kind of surface.
Black,
yeah, it's so black, it's like space. But if you get good vision, you get under that level, like you're down, like I mainly dive the A-frames, that area. So there's but getting down under that silk cloud, and you're just like swimming around in space. It's really cool. I've got like photos, and like people who don't do that wouldn't believe that it's not a night dive, but it's I do quite like Loch Long. I haven't done that for a while.
Yeah,
we did was that Twin Piers, isn't it?
Yeah, the piers.
Yeah.
And well, the first time we saw a scallop swimming.
Yeah.
Oh, I love seeing,
That
They were
was
very
just like a
funny.
first for us. And
Weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
but yeah.
I always, they seem so vulnerable when you watch them doing that, and just watch them swim, and it's just like they're making so much effort.
Yeah.
And I just sit and admire them making the effort to kind of move. It must take a lot out of them doing that.
But yeah, we've got such a lot to see in the UK. That's a great thing. Yeah.
Right, I better get his questions
We
done.
Oh
better,
yeah, I
have we?
forgot about that bit.
Yeah. So one of our first questions is, if you could take 3 people diving, they don't have to be divers, but it's just the principle of taking them into the under the water. Who would you take and why?
I find all these kind of questions really tricky. Yes, I've thought of loads of different people. But one of the first ones coming to mind is I read quite a while ago, like maybe when I was getting into diving, and read the historical kind of diving novels, like the people who are the pioneers. And I read Lottie Hass's biography. Have you read it?
No, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's just really interesting because of the era and the time. And it's out of print now. It's hard to get a hold of. But I read that, and it's about her joining the expedition. It's like, her meeting hands and kind of joining the expedition, joining the team and becoming the secretary, and she wasn't originally meant to be on the expedition. She was only, the producer came in and seen her and said, no, she can come because she looks pretty on the photos and things like that, because that was the time. And they didn't want to teach her to dive. She asked and they refused. So she took some scuba kit and went to a local river and taught herself.
No way.
And it's like, So part of me is like, that's really, like, as an instructor, I'm like, it's really dangerous. Don't do that. But also, like, yes, like, if nobody's going to let you do it, just, So I just thought it was kind of cool. And she was on this expedition out to the Red Sea. And obviously, there's lots and lots of books and films about that whole era. And just some of the stories in it, they're mad. So part of me is like, would I want to go back and dive those kind of dive, because that sounds amazing. At the same time, I kind of want my own kit, because I'm sure diving with that kit, like in the 50s, would be terrifying. Like there's one example in the book of the rebreather kind of develops an issue, and she basically ends up swallowing that kind of caustic liquid that's in there, and it's just, I think that can still happen now, but like there's all the different issues that she had, or to bring somebody like that from that era back here and to like see how different it is, and just a kit and the different kind of setup and that kind of thing. So that was one person I thought of. And then kind of in a similar vein, in a way, I actually thought it was an interesting question, because I thought of my granddad, because I actually didn't know him. So like, it's not like somebody I know, because I think he died when I was maybe like 3. So I didn't really know him as a person, but I do know that he was a dispatch rider in World War II, and he was in France riding around motorcycles. And I know that when he came home, he was working in the shipyards, and he used to work on the cranes. He used to run along the top of the cranes, apparently quite well known for having a very good head for heights. So I kind of assume he'd be okay with being underwater. But I like the idea that he built the ships, and sometimes when I go and dive a wreck, I look up the thing, and I don't really know enough to figure it out, but I sometimes wonder, what if this wreck actually went through one of the Tyneside shipyards? Because it could have. So that, I think that'd be kind of cool, like for somebody who used to build ships to see that. And I think he'd probably be adventurous enough to handle it. Not that you necessarily need to be that adventurous to dive now. So that was another thought that I had. And I'm not giving you much of a chance to answer, I think.
No, it's fine.
No, it's great.
And then the other person that I was thinking of is purely selfish, and it's not really to do with the person at all. It's kind of bad. It's actually guests that you've had on your program. I'm going to go back and listen to a podcast. It's Becky Kagan-Schott.
Yes.
And that is purely, and it's not that I want to take her. It's like I want to be on a dive with her, because her photos are incredible. Like it's what she's seeing, and Antarctica and the Galapagos and the different places. Like, that's a completely selfish. I'd just like to be doing those dives, so that's why I'm picking her.
Yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. And you're right. She is just amazing and just so down to earth as
It
well
was
as a
amazing to have
diver.
her on, wasn't it?
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
Yeah, I've
some
definitely
of the,
gone back and listened to that.
yeah, and some of the photos she took with like the polar bears and that. It's just
Yeah,
like, wow,
yeah.
you know, so you can actually see the individual hairs. You know, you think she's actually took that at a distance. The camera and the lens and the skill to do that is amazing to
Yeah.
see that. So,
And the
Definitely,
conditions she dives in as well, the extreme cold. And yeah, you just think that is really hardcore
yeah,
diving, but she just loves it. And that comes across in her pictures and, you know, all her social media as well. It's, she's kind of someone you'd kind of look up to. Yeah.
That's well, she came up on my list.
Oh,
Hopefully I'll meet at some point.
And I don't think we've had any of those people as
no,
from our previous guests. So
no,
they're unique.
they're new.
So well done. That's really good.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so what gets you out of your comfort zone? We talk about everyone else's. What what gets you out of your comfort zone?
So a lot of things, because the very definition of comfort zone is the fact that you're, getting out of your comfort zone is you're doing something that you don't know that you can do. So it makes you kind of uncomfortable when you do new stuff. And if you're going to do new stuff and learn new stuff, it's going to make you uncomfortable. So a whole lot of things. But I was thinking about this in relation to my work, and I do a lot of innovation. Like I said, there's no school that you can go to or training course to do diving psychology. So what I'm doing is kind of, new. It's it's clinical psychology, it's a profession, but it's also feeling quite new. And I get so many ideas. I want to make new things. So for example, I made PADI psychological diver specialty, like is the first like innovation thing I made. And recently, well, not recently, but during the pandemic, I made a program that's ACT for scuba divers. It's like teaching some of these skills, like you said, about what you do if you get that weird feeling. Like one of the skills that you do in this program is kind of connecting to that. So I'm like making these programs, and then you kind of, the idea is really fun, and then creating them is really great, but then you've got to actually do them with people, and that's terrifying. So that I find that really, really uncomfortable. So like that first one I mentioned because I actually felt physically sick. At the first time I taught PADI psychological diver, like, and got a classroom of people in, I was just like nauseous. And then you kind of do it again and again. And there's something I'm going to do next year, which is kind of group processes for, that model I mentioned, the how you get from stock information, and you can move that. I do that with a therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing. I'm going to innovate this new group, and you don't do a lot of group EMDR, so it's a new thing.
Is that where you get the person to look at your finger?
That's one. Yeah. Well, you can do it like that, but I actually do it. I have a program, I do it online, and it's digitally just, there's a dot, or there's beeps, or there's buzzers, there's different ways of doing it that don't involve me getting tennis elbow.
So the person, when they basically explain their issue, their incident, and they're looking at this point dot, think someone's finger as they're then explaining it.
Yeah. So it kind of is the answer to your reset question. It's how you take that file of stock memories from this thing that went wrong, and you open it up again.
Who discovered that?
What?
Who discovered that was a thing?
Francine Shapiro. She basically had a bad experience, went for a walk, and realized she was looking from side to side, and she was starting to feel better. And then she developed that. She developed it for military veterans. So most of the work is involved in it is PTSD, from military trauma, basically. And then that's been developing since the 80s. Wow. And it's very weird, but it works. Like I feel, there's somebody, I think I don't know if it's Sandra Bullock or Jamila Jamil. One of them was talking about EMDR, and they're saying like you feel robbed. Like you're paying like for a therapy session. You're sitting there thinking they're just getting me to follow this dot, and you literally feel, but then you feel better. So it's so weird, but it works. And it's like I'm not always talking to people about their trauma. Sometimes I'm just getting them to sit with it and follow the dot. It's a really weird and very, very effective, interesting. But doing it individually is kind of a big investment. Like I use it for like, so people have issues putting up DSMB or math skills or regulator skills. Like I use that to process that stuff that's kind of got that stuck in the first place. But it's a big investment if you pay for it individually. So I want to develop a way of doing it as a group so that it brings the cost down. And I maybe have a group that's just for people with mask issues, just for people with regulator issues, just for SMB issues, just for giant strides.
There's always issues with SMBs. You know, the whole thing is like, you know, you're underwater and you've got your gloves, you've got a reel, and all of a sudden the line flies.
So many
up,
people have a bad experience with it, so it gets stuck, and then people don't
I've
want to
seen
put it up anymore.
instructors tied up in line mid-water at the farms, and one's gone to help, and then they've gone tangled, and it's like, oh yeah, look, two instructors tied up together. It's quite funny.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like we were saying before, sometimes it's funny, everybody comes up and think, what on earth were you doing? But sometimes it actually exceeds that capacity to cope, and it means the next time you pull your reel out, your heart's racing and you actually start making mistakes and it gets worse. So that's, I want to do that. But again, that's another of these innovations that make me really uncomfortable. But yeah, I kind of have to, because I'm pushing people to push through their discomfort. So I kind of have to do stuff that's a bit uncomfortable for me as well, I think.
Yeah, no, very good answers.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our final question is, if you had a billboard that the whole world could see, what would you put on your billboard? It could be writing, it could be an audio, it could be something visual, a video, but what message would you want to put out there on your billboard?
I think, like, from the beginning, it actually kind of connects to that last thing that we were just talking about. But from the beginning, what I always wanted to do was bring psychology together with diving. Because to me, from my very first dry dive, it was obvious that these things go together and we learn about ourselves, about our confidence, we change our confidence with growth. We learn about our mental health. We can do all sorts of things. We learn about the general psychology of humans from diving, but also diving can help us. Psychology can help us as divers. I kind of like the idea of having, I don't know, like a sort of flip sidey thing to get across the idea that psychology can help us as divers, as well as kind of help us learn more about ourselves. And it would kind of center around that thing we were just talking about before, that when there's something that is stuck, like the SMB fear or the DSMB fear or the math skill fear, that those things actually can be overcome. We don't have to walk around and carry them and be like almost like little bombs waiting to go off. Like if you've got those sensitivities, they can be an issue later down the line and lead to an incident. But actually those things can be fixed before you get to the point that there's an incident. Because I would much rather see people to fix a small issue that's kind of getting in the way than see them after they've been to the chamber because they've panicked and bolted the surface. I can do both, but I prefer to people not getting hurt and to be able to work with it earlier. It would be maybe something, I don't know about the graphics of it, but some sort of video kind of getting the flip side of that across, that there's a symbiotic relationship there. And that psychology
it's hand
can help.
in hand, isn't it? You need one and you need the other, but you need both. It's really interesting. Yeah, and I'm sure it will make a lot of people think, because some people think, oh, diving is just jumping in the water, but it's not. It is, it's a whole different world under the water, and you've got to have that preparation and toolkit, like you said, to be happy underwater. It's really cool.
It is a whole different world. I love that part of diving.
Yeah, no, it really is. So if people want to find out more about you or make contact with you, where are your sort of best places? Social media, website?
That's the website's really the best place, because it's got it's got links to all the emails and things, but it's fittodive.org, and there's links through there to contact or to set up a call. There's also obviously links to all the courses, because I make the courses in order to prevent getting to me and having the trauma. But the on there is also the email ok@fittodive.org, so there's that email as well. Social media, I'm not quite as active on recently, and I tend to be harder for me to keep up with that. It'll come better through email.
Great. Well, it's been really interesting, and we really pleased you came onto the
covered a fair bit there
podcast. Yeah. And I'm sure we've probably just scratched the surface, and it gives people a lot more to think about, and maybe make contact with you to sort of delve in a bit deeper to any issues they've got, or just learn a bit more.
It's been really interesting chatting to you. Like, as I said, I'm going to definitely go back and listen to a few more, and And thank you as well for kind of entertaining. It's like my special interest. I can just talk forever about diving
No, it's good.
psychology.
No, it's all good stuff.
That's good. It shows you're really passionate about
Yeah.
it, and you're really committed to it, and it's it's all for the good of diving as well,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
So thanks for coming on. Thanks for
Yeah.
being part of the
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, let's say, that was really good. Great one to follow on from when we spoke to Sally. And I just think that, it's such a deep subject. We could spend hours, couldn't you, chatting about it.
It's just like you scratch the surface, and then it's a
Literally
whole,
scratch the surface. Yeah.
but then it just brings up all other subjects, doesn't it? It's just kind of when you're talking about your head, there's so much. But yeah, it kind of made sense where she was talking about filing it or things getting stuck, just like a computer
It's
or a laptop.
weird, isn't it? Because we all although we all are our own people and we're different, but we often behave in the same way.
Well, we've all got a brain that's
and it's that people like Laura and other people can figure all this stuff out. The whole thing that looking at someone's finger and waggling it about, that's bizarre, isn't it? But it works.
So very it's such a huge subject, but I think it's not beyond the realms of anybody. You just need to break it down and make it.
You can see how they would use this sort of science as time goes on, for next Mars trips and going deeper into the oceans. If we're going to be staying underwater longer, how to, all this is relevant stuff, isn't it? And pretty mind-boggling, really.
Yeah, but interesting, and hopefully listeners will sort of take something from it, and
I hope so.
Maybe look up Laura, and she's got courses there. It might be of interest, and it's good. It's not too deep. It could be something as simple as mask clearing, or putting up an SMB.
Well, it always makes me laugh about it, the SMB, because generally speaking,
never goes to plan.
Well, no, it does, but there's so many ways that can go wrong, and often do, and for everybody. And I've seen new divers do really well with them, and I've seen really experienced, really highly qualified divers make a complete hash of it, and then it's just weird. It's just sometimes they go right, sometimes they don't.
Yeah, but again, it's all state of mind. If you think I'm gonna do this, and it's having that being prepared, like you said, stepping back and giving yourself some time. And
I think that's a good key, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's just rather than just bowl in and think you're going to do it, just step back a moment.
Let your heart rate run away with you, and I think sometimes that's a vicious circle, because once you feel, you suddenly go, because you're getting anxious because you're trying to complete a task underwater or something, whatever it is. And I think sometimes that is the best thing, is to step back and just breathe.
Well, we've all been there, haven't we?
Yep. So anyway, we want to say thank you very much. It's good to be back recording.
It is.
We had a little break, haven't we, over the summer?
Yes. Yeah. Well, 4-6 weeks. But we're now ready to get back recording, and we've got a few things scheduled of people to speak to. So the podcast will be back out on a fortnightly basis. As usual, these are sponsored by Narked at 90. They are beyond technical, so look them up, narkedat90.com. And it's a whole plethora of, do you like that word? Plethora? Very good, yes. They've got lots for their... I looked it up this morning and I thought, I need to use that somewhere in tonight's recording. So I'm going to leave that with you, plethora. It's a whole plethora of items at Narked at 90 for your diving requirements. For the technical diver, the rebreather diver, and there's plenty there for the
They're not
recreational
just
diver.
technical.
They're not just technical.
They're
No.
not just technical. No.
No, so no, we've even if you need like something, all your important bits of dive equipment, like dive computers, they've got a whole range of dive computers, shear water and ratio for water. And the best bit about Arctic 90 is they are people that you can talk to, and they help give advice and will guide you through.
Chances are they've done it.
Yes.
And they'll know. So
yeah, they're very experienced and an amazing team as well.
Yeah. Well, we want to say thanks to Laura for coming on. It's been awesome, and it's been good to get round the mics again. And
they all worked.
Yeah, all worked. No gremlins this side. So hey, we got to say that was tonight
the Big Scuba Podcast.
Now that does wrap up today's episode of the Big Scuba podcast. But if you want to hear more from the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button depending on what platform you are listening on. That way you will never miss an episode from us. But if you are listening on Apple Podcasts and did enjoy what you heard today, we would really appreciate it if you head to the show page to leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help us. If you do, please take a screenshot of that review and send it to us on Instagram, and we'll give you a shout out to say a big thank you. If you have any questions for us or anything that has been mentioned in today's episode, be sure to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms or send us an email. The links are in the show notes. We will get back to you no matter what. If you have made it to this point in the episode, we both want to say a big thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.